bloody vengeance would be Eden's fate. The heart of darkness doomed to wait for the sons of Kerensky, grim and merciless. I have a complicated past with the Wyvern. Of all the classic mech designs in the 3025 technical readout, the man-in-armor Wyvern design was so disinteresting to me that I never really gave the mech an actual chance. Only years later did I look back at the record sheets to identify that it was actually a pretty solid design. It might not have been the fastest mech or the most heavily armored, but it did have a decent weapons loadout considering the time period where mechs were given a little bit of everything. Though unlike the Shadowhawk, which had a similar loadout but much worse, the Wyvern's single LRM-10, large laser, SRM-6, and 2 small lasers made it quite a powerful mech at the 40 to 55 ton weight bracket. Now we're not going to get into the Wyvern's other variants, the Royal variants, or even the SLDF versions, as this isn't a Wyvern video, and they involve a little bit of time traveling on the part of the BattleTech folks to retroactively make old mechs more powerful. Sticking with the established 3025 lore, the Wyvern was an effective and, in-universe, a well-loved battle mech that excelled as a generalist. Those tend to do well. It was useful in a wide variety of situations, and that's a big factor in making it a success. So it's not a surprise that the Wyvern was in among the SLDF forces that left the Inner Sphere with Kerensky in the Exodus fleet. The history beyond that, of course, diverges, as plenty of Wyverns were still available for House armies to use during the Succession Wars, but since this is a Wyvern 2C video, we'll stick to the clan history. When the Exodus fleet reached the Pentagon Worlds and attempted their first run at creating a new civilization in 2786, much of the SLDF military was mothballed or at least placed into long-term storage at sites called Bryan Caches. There was little expectation that they would ever be needed, but when you're that far out into the periphery, waste not, want not. Except for a small professional army, Alexander Kerensky hoped that the might of the SLDF might never be needed again. This hope, of course, did not last long, as the deep-seated rivalry between the former SLDF members from different locations in the Inner Sphere began to squabble, plot, and seethe with jealousy as some settlements and planets developed more successfully than others. When it all fell apart and Nicholas Kerensky led the Second Exodus, many Wyverns went with them. When the clans returned to the Pentagon Worlds in Operation Klondike, retribution for the abandonment of Kerensky's dream of the new civilization was swift and brutal. Bryan Caches were looted by both the clans and the Pentagon World defenders, and the Wyvern served on both sides of the conflict. Through that conflict, the mech continued to earn its reputation as a capable urban fighter with the SRMs and lasers it carried. When the smoke cleared, the clans were victorious. For decades, the clans still actively hunted for additional Bryan Caches squirreled away on planets which had been long forgotten by humanity. Either through the conflict or just the march of time, these caches became treasure troves without any treasure map to lead people to them. When one was discovered, it was usually a hotly contested affair. If you've read the story of the fall of Clan Wolverine, you're already well informed on just how much time, effort, and blood the clans were willing to spend controlling those caches. When the Bryan Cache was found by Clan Burrock warriors, they were excited to see some SLDF battle mechs and vehicles. But the true prize was the vast quantity of battle mech parts that would make refitting existing mechs and even building new ones far easier. There were trials, of course, but eventually Clan Burrock would win them and secured the site. There were so many resources there that it was decided that they would convert the cache itself into a production line for refits and new Wyverns. As with the other SLDF-era mechs and clan employ, the refits and redesigns were many during that golden century following Nicholas Kerensky's death. Clan Burrock scientists looked at the Wyvern and identified some obvious upgrades that would necessitate an entirely new 2C design. The Wyvern 2C would be first produced in 2843, and immediately it was obvious that this mech was going to be a popular pick for garrison and second-line clan units. Starting with a Type OES-95 light-modified endosteel frame and a standard 180 fusion engine, the name of the game is effective and cheap. It must have been tempting to slap on an XL engine into the 45-ton mech to buy some extra tonnage, but the goal was to create something inexpensive that Burrock could then export to other clans without expecting to see it ever used against them in frontline actions. The standard 180 engine meant that the mech was not going to be breaking any speed records at a top speed of 65 km per hour. However, when you see the rest of the mech and its loadout, you'll understand why it's not a huge issue. The mech's 12 double heat sinks will be useful later, and the 7 tons of Mix 3 composite armor is fair for its weight. The SL-150 Mod 5 jump jets allow the Wyvern 2C to jump up to 120 meters, which is solid and really helps the mech perform well in the urban environment. One could even get away with describing it as an urban mech, if you wanted to put a thumb in the eye of another much less effective mech design that claims the moniker. An interesting quirk from field reports show that the unique setup of jump jets in the legs of the Wyvern 2C created an optical effect not too far away from walking in mid-air, motion that could be off-putting to those who haven't encountered it before. Skilled Mechwarriors could even use this to distract opponents at the opportune moment. The Wyvern 2C's communication system is a consolidated BMR-3 CC setup, and the targeting and tracking system is a Series GDS, which has served the mech well in a rugged design. The mech itself looks quite a bit like its inspiring cousin, which could be a good thing or a bad thing depending upon how you feel about the man-in-armor mech designs. While I'm personally not a big fan, the Wyvern 2C's art is head and heels improvement over the original 3025 art, so I won't smack a gift horse in the mouth. Now let's get to the fun stuff. If you know the original Wyvern's loadout, the 2C is going to look familiar, though obviously you can cram a lot more into a mech with that lighter clan technology. For a primary weapon, the Wyvern 2C is equipped with an ER large laser in the right arm. Good at all ranges, packs a solid punch, it's a good choice. It's backed up with an LRM-10 in the center torso and an SRM-6 in the right. These missile weapons contribute well to that dangerous at all ranges philosophy for the battle mech. For the mid-range, the Wyvern 2C can use its 2 ER medium lasers installed in the left arm for a consistent energy weapon punch. Finally, for those close-up brawls and urban combat, it can employ its 2 standard machine guns in the left torso and a flamer in the center torso. The loadout of the Wyvern 2C, along with its decent speed and jump capability, make the mech a very successful fighter across environments and even in dense cities where the flamer and machine guns become crucial for keeping combined arms units in check. If there's a drawback in the design, it's the heat generation. You won't have an issue until short range, but alpha striking is pretty much out of the question unless you leave that ER large laser out. Once you do get up to that 2 to 4 hex range, you're better off doing exactly that and letting loose with everything else on the mech. The partial alpha strike without the ER large laser is still up to 52 damage, which is quite good. Obviously, there's some variability with the LRMs and SRMs involved, but even approximately 30 to 35 damage at close range is pretty solid. With the data collected from initial deployments, Clan Buruk leaned into the Wyvern 2C's role as the urban fighter. With the rise of the Omni-Mech, the Wyvern was not heavily impacted as it really never was seen as a frontline unit. Whenever Clan Buruk colonized a new world or claimed existing settlements, more often than not the Wyvern 2C would be out there to hold it. In times of peace, it even took on the role of a construction mech, using its hands and humanoid structure to its advantage moving heavy objects. Clan Buruk's willingness to trade spread the Wyvern 2C across the tumens of the other clans, so it wasn't a rare sight up through the Wars of Reaving. Unfortunately, Buruk was also trading with the Dark Caste, which was discovered by the Khan of the Star Adders in 3059. What started as a trial of absorption devolved into a fierce battle between Clan Buruk, Clan Star Adder, and Clan Bloodspirit, which was furious over not being granted the right to fight the trial against Buruk themselves. In a long series of convoluted events that deserve their own video someday, Clan Buruk's Khan, Sakhan, and likely replacement Galaxy Commander were killed in battle, and Clan Buruk's remaining forces ended up joining the Star Adders to fight against Clan Bloodspirit. Once Clan Bloodspirit was hobbled, the remaining warriors and civilians of Clan Buruk were absorbed into Clan Star Adder. This included their remaining Wyvern 2Cs and the Manzikert Fabrication and Assembly Plant Gamma on Dagda. As a result, Clan Star Adder ended up with the largest number of Wyvern 2Cs in their tumen. However, it can still be found across the other clans as well due to the open trade of the design and an eager market for an effective urban combat mech. The Wyvern 2C did receive an upgrade in 3071 that added a few new toys. Since it's the 3070s, one of these toys has to be the heavy laser. Starting with the large heavy laser in the right arm, the massive weapon can do 16 damage out to 15 hexes at the cost of a hefty 18 heat. While the damage is impressive, the 2C2 didn't receive any additional heat sinks, so you're going to have to get by with just 12. In the left arm, a pair of medium heavy lasers can do their 10 damage apiece out to 9 hexes at the cost of 7 heat. For close-range fighting, a pair of small heavy lasers join the large in the right arm, which can do 6 damage apiece out to 3 hexes. So far, if you've alpha striked, that's 38 heat on a mech with 12 double heat sinks. But we're not done yet. In the right torso, the 2C2 carries an advanced tactical missile 9 system, along with 2 tons of ammunition in the left torso. That's an additional 6 heat when fired. An ER flamer in the center torso can reach out to 7 hexes, and an array of 3 light machine guns finishes off the loadout. Now that's an impressive bunch of weapons on a 45-ton battle mech. Obviously you're not going to be alpha striking, but it is possible to be conservative with your weapons groupings and keep your cockpit from turning into a hotbox. At the longest ranges, the large heavy laser and the ATM-9 can be fired together without generating too much extra heat. And by the time you're in close range, if you hold off on the large heavy laser and just fire the other weapons, you won't go into the red too much. The challenge will be resisting that urge to fire the large heavy laser at point-blank range instead of the other weaponry. Then again, in some situations, you may need that punch-through power. In the theoretical, mutually assured destruction scenario with a high explosive ATM ammunition, an alpha strike against a battle mech at close range would be up to 80 damage, which could generate 48 heat, 24 of which would be heat sinked away at the end of the turn, leaving the Wyvern 2C at 24 heat. If you manage to win the shutdown and ammo explosion rolls, you're going to be in pretty much out of action until the next turn. Still, there's an opportunity for fun here against an opponent who doesn't know what the Wyvern 2C2 can do in such a situation. Now, Mechfrog says with a wicked grin, let's talk about a Mechfrog variant. I was eager to build a city-stalking monster of a Wyvern 2C that could fit in along with the other ill-clan variants. The only change in the mech structure I went with was the XL engine to buy a little bit more weight for gear. The rest was the same as the stock Wyvern 2C. Now, as far as weapons go, I tried to keep the theme of lasers with some missiles and some short-range anti-infantry. The original has its ER lasers and the 2C2 has its heavy lasers, so I think the MF version must have pulse lasers. So we'll start with a large pulse laser in the right arm for those mid-range shots on hardened targets. Backing it up with the longest range is an advanced tactical missile 6 system in the left arm with a ton of each ammunition. At the mid and short range, things start to get interesting with the addition of 2 medium pulse lasers in the left arm, a standard flamer in the center torso, and 9 machine guns in the right torso. Yep, 9. That's what's going on. It's fine. It's going to be fine. This is all fine. The loadout is solid at the long and medium ranges and can be quite nasty close up, especially if you are an infantry platoon. You wouldn't want to turn your corner in a major urban area and see this Wyvern bearing down on you. It will ruin your entire weekend. For the final verdict on the Wyvern 2C, I think it's a very solid entry for the second line clan battle mech in a crowded medium mech category, and it's one mech that has really not gotten any attention at all. Even at 45 tons, it can hold its own and really do well in an urban setting. In doing this video, it also made me look back and rethink my views on the original Wyvern, which is a very good thing. It's often a good idea to reflect on presumptions that may be dated with a new perspective. I'd happily include either of them in my Tumen. I just hope we see a CGL redesign for the model that will do it justice and possibly move away from the man-in-armor look without looking entirely different. So what do you think of the Wyvern 2C? Do you think it's worth the effort to trot the second line mech out for a battle, or is there a mech you think would perform better in that medium weight bracket? Let me know in the comments. Big thank you for watching and for hitting all the buttons so that YouTube knows it's a video worth sharing. We're ahead of schedule to hit that 10,000 subscriber mark by the end of the year. It completely blows my mind that just a year ago I was just about hitting that 2,000 subscriber mark. It's been a wild year and I appreciate the support. Thank you so much. Until we meet again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.